Well, welcome back. It's another We Wonder 2021, and we're very excited about it. And what's the most important question as you kick off a year? What are your goals? Right? I get that question all the time. How am I setting my goals? What goals should I be setting? What is my focus for 2021? And if you haven't thought about this already, because we're already into that second week of the year, you probably should have, but it's never too late, right? So this is not, and I repeat, not a resolution that you wrote down once and then you just kind of set to the side and you went, oh, I never did that. Or it's been 30 days and I'm out, right? This is a business modeling goal session, right? How to set up yourself for success and keep a track to run on throughout the entire year for 2021 and to guarantee your success. That's right, I said it, to guarantee your success. And what you do along the way is you course correct based on your goals and your model and your strategy. So with that in mind, and again, that's one of the top questions I get. How do we do it at We Insure? How do people do it in general? And why do they do it? So with all those fun questions in mind, I have our guest today is Ron Caravella, also known as the Insurance Fella. So Ron's joining us today. He's our VP of Sales, and really what he manages is our team on both sides and handles agency development. Very appropriate for today's topic, obviously, since we're talking about goals, setting, planning, and the future of your agency at We Insure. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Ron, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's a happy new year to everybody. And I have a passion for goal setting and for all sorts of agency development. So thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to speaking with you on that.
I'm excited about it. Let me ask you first, Ron, why you?
So why me? Because because I'm the insurance fellow, Ron Caravella. That's why. But all kidding aside, I have over 15 years of experience in the independent insurance agency world. I actually started off as an unlicensed CSR over 15 years ago in an independent insurance agency. And eventually, 7 years later, was one of the co-owners, worked in multiple different roles in that agency. And 8 years ago, was fortunate enough to buy a franchise from We Insure. And a year after that, came onto the corporate staff here. And so it's been exciting to be able to see the amazing growth and development of an amazing organization like We Insure. And it's been an honor, truly, Chris, for me to be a part of the success that many of our agency owners have experienced. I started off here 7 years ago as the corporate trainer, training as they came on board. And it's been, as I mentioned, seeing where some of these agents are 7 years later. It's a proud moment for me, to be honest with you.
Well, Ron, I have to say you're one of the first people that I met when I, came, to visit the company, and you're obviously a very dynamic figure. Being a former owner, understanding the training aspect of, or still a current owner, but owning an agency yourself. Your family's been in insurance the entire time, so no more appropriate person on our staff and our team than you to talk about this particular topic. So this is very exciting. But as we go through, let's talk about, the goals themselves. I don't want to be too low level, but let's start off on a lower level and say, let's say, what are goals? Why do we have them from your perspective? And again, this applies to everything in your life, I'm sure, but from an insurance perspective, what are they and why do we even bother with this?
Sure. Yeah. And you're right. Sometimes we always say, well, let's not get too basic, but yeah, let's talk about what's the definition of a goal, right? And the definition, according to Merriam-Webster, is the end to which effort is directed. So I really love that. And whenever we start some of our training sessions, Chris, I like to put that up on the screen. And why is that? I always underline effort, right? And without effort, a goal is useless. The very definition of the word says, if you want to achieve the end, you must put effort into it. So that's the what, right? And now what's the why? The why is without proper vision and without proper goals, an end in sight, how can you ever reach that end? And so, because to each person, the end is different. So I was speaking to some agency owners, and I'll tell you a quick story. When I came on board to the corporate side in 2014, I spoke to one of our existing agency owners who tells me, Ron, my goal is to be able to clear 100,000. And that's really all I need. And this particular agency owner has pretty much everything paid off. So that 100,000, if they can clear 100,000, that's what they're bringing home, netting to themselves. That paid all their bills plus funded any accounts that they had, retirement, college, all for their kids, everything, right? And now when you, but at the same time you talk to somebody else, that's not the right number. They need 500,000, a million, what have you. So, and the reason I bring that up is because to each person, the end is different. To that one other person I spoke to 7 years ago, the end was 100,000, six figures. Mm-hmm. Now, somebody else, the end is actually maybe seven figures or more, right? And so knowing that that's the end that you want to reach, that's one of the really important, the important factors involved in setting goals, knowing that this is where I want to be. So that's the reason why, that's the what, I gave you the definition, but the why, so you know where your effort needs to be directed towards.
Well, Rod, I can tell you the why is probably the most important piece because that's the driver. If you got a strong enough why, and you've heard this before, you got a strong enough why, you can do anything, right? So with the strategic planning that you do with our agency owners, we also put down the step-by-step, the tactical aspects of how to achieve that, backing into what your goal may be. And again, I'll tell you from my experience, goals are scary, right? So sometimes when people don't like to do goal planning in these kind of sessions because it creates the bad word we call accountability, right? Ooh, so if you never wrote this down and you never expressed your goals to anybody, you don't have to achieve them, right? There's nothing to do. You could say you had a very good year and no one would know, how to compare that or measure it. So for me, in the term I like to use is unacceptable, right? It's unacceptable if you write it down today and you really focus on these goals, then you really do this on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, you can course correct. And it's unacceptable not to really hit those goals. So for me, it's a very personal thing. And I do appreciate the session because I understand that it's necessary, but I may not understand all the nuances of the insurance side. So I know there's multiple parts, right? I know that there's current income, right, from a policy that was sold this year. And then there's the residual income that goes on for, 5, 10, 15 years in perpetuity that actually is kind of what people call that mailbox money. So how do you plan for some of those things, right? And then part of that is the retention, which we'll talk about in a minute, retaining those agents over a long period of time and what we do and what they can do to make that better. So all of it comes together in a very important, strategic session, which we're going to show you right now. We're going to show you some of that worksheet that we use. And again, simple is better, right? The more complicated you have 7 tabs on a spreadsheet that lead to each other, may be necessary to come up with some numbers. But as far as goal planning goes, if it can't be said in 1 or 2 or 3 words, right, or a sentence, then you're probably never going to remember it nor do it. So That's what I love about this session is it goes from complicated to really, really clear and simple, straightforward. If you have clarity, you definitely can execute. So one thing I do like to mention, and this is one of my favorite things to do, especially at this time of the year, is I go to December 31st at the end of the year on my calendar, and I block off an hour. I write down the goals that we came up with today, and I put them in there, and I had that hour is meant for me to celebrate 2021. I did the exact same thing in 2020, and I did it with my team, right? We're going to celebrate on this time and this day on December 31st. You know why? Because we're going to hit these goals and probably exceed them. And if we do that, we're going to celebrate those successes. And so I give myself a time frame. I give myself the latitude and the permission to go ahead and celebrate. But that's what I'm celebrating. Once a year is completed and we've shut that book and the chapter is over and we've done exactly what we wanted to do. So how do we get there, Ron? What does that worksheet look like?
Oh, awesome. Well, I'll tell you this, Chris, you said something that actually made me smile and kind of chuckle inside here. Goals are sometimes scary for people, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do with our sessions and our goal and our ultimate end is to make sure that goals are not scary, but they're smart, right? So that rather than being scary, let's make SMART more of an acronym, right? And so what we start by telling everyone is this: make them SMART goals, SMART. S for specific. Make sure your goals are specific, right? M for measurable. Make sure the goals are measurable. Then A for attainable. that goals need to be something that you can attain. R, relevant. T, time bound. So that's the definition, Chris, of a SMART goal. So I love that you said, hey, goal setting is scary for people, because the truth is, I know, Chris, you've talked to a lot of people as our chief development officer, and all the roles that you've played in the past at different organizations. You deal with people like similarly to what I'm dealing with our agency owners. Many of them, or some of them, I shouldn't say many of them, but some of them are just scared. They don't set the goal because either one, they don't know, or two, they're just not aware of how can I follow through. They're scared of that. So number one, what we start with, Chris, and I'm going to share a annual plan that we do with our agency owners. As you can see here, it's a relatively simple 6-page document, and it's a great start for our agency owners to make sure that they can start setting SMART goals. So again, specific goals, measurable goals, attainable goals, relevant goals, and time-bound goals. And so that's what this annual plan that we do with our agency owners is all about. And the ultimate end goal of me and my team, we have an amazing agency development team with a number of different people involved, our agency development consultants and the support team there that are working with our agency owners on their pathway to success. You know, we start with our agency owner first to make sure, or their designated manager or agent in charge, whoever is running that office. Sometimes you have sales managers that are involved, but we set this with them and so that they fully understand this document. Chris, then they can set this and set time aside and do this with their team, their producers, their support staff. Every single person in the organization within their agency or their enterprise needs to be aware of what the goals are and what the end success, what the definition of success is for the owner of the business. And there's a shared vision that way. So you mentioned it yourself, you know, with your team, we celebrate. And we, number one, we analyze, as you can see here, page 1, we're analyzing the current business situation. Where is the business right now? Right? And we'll talk about that. And then we talk about what are some of the biggest wins and accomplishments? Because as you said, we have to celebrate success. Look at some, Chris, I'm a big sports fan. And what happens whenever you see someone winning the championship game, someone wins a Super Bowl, or we just had Alabama winning the national championship here in NCAA football. They're going to celebrate. We have to celebrate the wins and accomplishments that the team, right, the organization has achieved. So that's what we do. Number one, right there, biggest wins and accomplishments. But then also, Chris, I want our agency owners looking at disappointment. Everybody has some disappointments, and that's okay. But let's go ahead and identify that and figure out what the impact of not achieving that was to our business. And then from there, from every disappointment, it's okay. Just like, you know, we tell our associates, we tell our business, our staff, it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to have disappointments. But what did we learn from it, right? And so that's what we like to do right there. So first 2 pages of this document, Chris, are all about what did we learn? We're celebrating success. What's our current situation? And then and analyzing that. Now we're going to look forward to 2021, and we list different issues. And I love this part right here, Chris. A start, stop, keep exercise. We identify. Yeah, and is this something that makes sense to any business? I mean, it's not just insurance agencies, right, Chris?
Exactly. No, that's exactly what I was going to say. There's things you've been doing just because you've been doing them. And that's not a great reason to continue to do them, especially if you think, do I even need this? There's no efficiency to continue to do things over and over again, right? So it comes back to, is it effective? If it's effective, then I'm going to keep it. If it's not, get rid of it.
Exactly. And you said it right there. Start. What are we going to start doing? What are we going to stop doing? And what are we going to keep doing? And that's again, these things seem really simple. And I love being able to break it down in a simple way, because as we said before, the truth is there's so much, I think people get apprehensive just thinking about sitting down and setting goals. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it has to be done. It's imperative that it's done. And that's, and ultimately, metrics. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about metrics. Let's go a little deeper into that a little later on in our session. But we'll talk to our agency owners, Chris, about numbers. What's your new business goal? What's your premium goal? What's your commission goal? Commissions are ultimately your revenue, right? And we lay it down right there. And then I think this is the most important part. Chris, I always tell everybody you have three different kinds of goals. You have long-term, lifetime goals. That can be 5 years plus. It can be 20 years. So for an agency owner or for a business owner, it may be something as simple as saying, I want my agency or my business to fund my retirement. So let's say you're 45 years old and you want to retire at 65. So technically that's a 20-year goal, if that's your long-term goal. Okay. But now what's your midterm goal? And that's typically 2 to 5 years. And then you have your short-term goals, which are going to be up to a year, daily, weekly, monthly, and so on up to a year. Those are your short-term goals. And to be honest with you, Chris, I tell everybody the long-term goals are great, but where should you really put your focus on? You got to have the long-term goal, but it's to a lesser extent your midterm, but the most is going to be more time needs to be spent on the short-term goal. And what we do is you can break it down, like I said, daily, weekly, and we want our agents to do that. But on this sheet, we break it down quarterly, right? So give them the quarterly and they can break it down from there. And so how do I achieve my goals? What are my key initiatives and marketing ideas that I'm going to put, plans that I'm going to put in place, or initiatives that I'm going to put in place? And then how will I measure my initiatives? Because it's great to say we are going to start spending 5 hours a week networking with different professionals. Now, that's great, but how will I measure the success of that 5 hours a week that I'm ultimately in the end, Chris, if we're spending 5-10 hours a week doing something and it's not paying the dividends that we expect it to, that's not a good thing for us to do, right?
Right.
So
well, I'll tell you that there's a few points in there that are pretty strong. And really, I know a lot of our prospective agency owners ask the question, what is really, what are the numbers I need to do? How many policies do I need to do to break even? And that's a very difficult answer to give because it depends on the premium of the policies and your cost structure, right? So I can't just go, here's a blanket answer. But I know what we tell folks, right? If you can try, your goal should be at least to do one policy bound a day, right? So if you can do basically 30 policies a month, you're on track for 360 for the year, and it sounds fantastic, right? So it's very interesting to have that as kind of a at least something to shoot for. But most of our agency owners are shooting way, way above that, right? They're shooting for much, much higher numbers. They're shooting for different things as they go through it. But as a starting point, I think that's an interesting way to look at it, saying if I can do one a day, right? It doesn't matter people I talk to, we can get that to be more efficient. It matters really, can I just shoot for one a day? Yeah.
And that's a great point, Chris, because, and that's a good number. And you're right. That's a good starting number for most people. And here's what I tell our agency owners. Now that you've identified that you want to write one policy per day, how do you now break that down? Because in order to, and let's use just, really easy numbers here. And even though you look at things like quote to bind ratios and things like that, but let's just say your quote to bind ratio is 50%, right? And so if you want to write one policy a day, that means now you have to quote 2 policies per day to get that one policy. And then I say, break it down a little bit more. So in order to get that one quote, maybe I need to do 10 sales activities. And the definition of a sales activity may be a cold call, maybe a networking meeting, maybe all sorts of different things. So you want to define what that is. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that in order to get 2 quotes, you need 10 sales activities, right? So now all of a sudden you know that in order to write one policy per day, I need 2 quotes done per day because I'm binding 50% of what I quote. And in order to get my 2 quotes, I need to do 10 sales activities a day. So now all of a sudden it becomes really simple. Rather than telling someone I need 30 policies per month, you can really break it down easily and say, I need to do 10 sales activities per day in order to hit my goal.
And again, that to me is simplicity, right? And we joke about this, because a lot of stuff you see, people are like, okay, they have complicated formulas. They have a lot of different things in place that they feel like they should be doing all of this, and it's a lot of busy work, but it doesn't yield results. And so for me, exactly what you did is a breakdown we've done at other companies and other firms. We basically keep it simple, stupid, right? It's keep it as simple as possible. So you can say, today, what I'm going to do is these 10 things because I know it yields this, right? So if you're selling life insurance, which I did the first part of my career, I knew that every appointment I had would not be a sale. It's life insurance. Let's be honest, right? So it's going to be more difficult to sell, but every appointment I had, if I only closed 1 out of 10 appointments, I knew if I averaged it out, I made at least $500 for having that conversation. Like if I went in and talked to you for an hour, I made $500 whether I made it or not, right? Because I knew the averages. So it keeps you on track and motivated, saying, man, I can't believe I missed that one. Oh, there's a negative aspect to it. It's always positive, right? There's always a component. Hey, I got past that no. I'm going to move to the next one. I got past that no. And so this is very similar in nature because this is a lot easier because you're dealing with We Insure, right? So we have a few things that make it a lot easier for you to do this. But before we get to that, I'm going to ask you, as an insurance professional, right? And understanding the business from multiple sides, pre-We Insure and post-We Insure, and dealing with all of these agency owners. And again, you must be a busy camper because last year we grew from 2 states and now we're in 15 states. And then we had, 50 new owners out there to deal with on a day-to-day basis, some very experienced coming from, major other brands, other captives, the Allstates, the State Farms, the Farmers, over to the Better model. And then other folks are ancillaries, right? They own large real estate organizations or teams or financial planning firms or life and health. And they said, we really need to add, property and casualty, and We Insure is the best model for that, of course, because it's so turnkey. But at the end of the day, you have different, degrees of experience with this planning session. So I'm sure you're a busy guy. So one of the questions I think people are thinking out there is, what are some key metrics? Like if I said, you don't know anything about insurance, what are the 3 or 4 or 5 areas that you say, listen, if you focus on these 4 things and really did these well, you'll be successful in insurance?
Yeah. And that's a great question. And even there, we can make it really complicated, Chris, or we can make it simple, right? Mm-hmm. And so as you can see by now, I think I try and keep it simple. And here's the thing. Simply, here's what it's all about. Number one, in the insurance business or in any sales organization, but let's talk insurance, you got to have prospects, quoting opportunities. So it starts there. You got to be able to bring opportunities or prospects in to be able to quote. With that comes a whole slew of things like market access. You got to have a product to sell, which We Insure ticks off that box. From day one, you have typically more market access than your competitors do, right? No matter where we're going, we're seeing that as a trend, right? And so that checkbox is ticked off, right? Then you got to be able to close, and that goes hand in hand with the amount of markets we have in the training and all that as well. So you brought up. So number one, it's how many prospects / quoting opportunities are you getting? Number two, what is your closing ratio? Quote, and I used the term quote to bind ratio earlier, right? That's your closing ratio. So think of it this way. And Chris, I'll tell you this right now. And I know some of the people listening are probably going to be shaking their head going, yep, I agree. There are some organizations, and especially in some of the captives, think about it. You only have one option to sell. You're a captive. You're selling one product A. We Insure gives you the power of choice. The power of We is having the choice, the different markets to sell. So let's just say you have a captive that's selling one product. Now all of a sudden your quote to bind ratio, your closing ratio is maybe 15%, maybe 20% if they're a rock star. Right? So what does that mean now? You want one policy, you got to quote 5. We Insure agents run much higher than that because think about it. Just like when you have more options to sell, we have. I actually have one of our top agents here in Florida tells me, Ron, I'm at 100% closing ratio, and I always and it's one of our top agents. But the truth is, they close. They're great salespeople as well. But when your quote closing ratio, even probably the weakest quoter in our organization can close more than probably some of the strongest quoters at some of these captive organizations. And that's a testament to the model, right? So that's your second initiative or KPI, right? What is your quoting close to bind ratio, closing ratio? Then once you get those policies, what's the third one? Service response time, servicing / service response time. And that's fine and dandy. Chris, when you don't have any customers, great, you don't have to service anybody, right? But think of it while you're building that book of business. And I always tell everyone, listen, the power of one, the number 168, that's the number of hours that you have in 1 week, right? And it doesn't matter who you are, but that never changes. And what can you do to change? It's allocating time to the things that make you, in this case, money, revenue generating activities. Mm-hmm. And so talking specifically about We Insure, that service response time. We have an entire back end service team and support team. It's not just service, Chris. It's the accounting. It's the agency services that's setting up everyone. It's the technology department that takes all that time off of our agents. Even the compliance department that helps you make sure that you're staying within a state of compliance. And of course, our service team, right, which is the backbone, I think, of what we do, because it really allows that agent, rather than filling up your time. Let's say you're an independent agent or a captive or anyone that's not part of We Insure. Your time now, all of a sudden, as you're building that book of business, gets sucked up into servicing your book of business and not selling anymore. And so that's a huge component. And one of the reasons, to be honest with you, Chris, that I purchased a We Insure franchise back in 2013, because I saw that. And not only did I see that, Chris, I experienced that in my previous agency. And that was the big struggle that we had. We hit a plateau. Right? Just like in any initiative, whether it's weight loss or building a business, people end up plateauing. And it's really up to us to identify why. And I identified that the reason was I had my people who couldn't sell because they were servicing and doing all sorts of administrative tasks rather than selling and growing, which is ultimately how we generate revenue. And then, of course, that if we have to throw in a fourth metric, Chris,
sure, that's good.
Yeah, retention, because you mentioned this, Chris. It's that residual income we talk about. Ultimately, in the end, in the P&C, property and casualty insurance world, the real money, as I like to say, the annuity, so to speak, or however way you want to equate it to, the revenue stream is in the renewals. And so the retention is super important. And that makes a huge difference. Think of it. You have 1,000 policies in your book of business. If you're retaining 90%, that means 900 policies or 900 customers are staying with you year to year, or from one year to the next. But even a few percentage points going down to 85, now all of a sudden that's 850 coming off of 1,000. That's 50 less that we're able to retain. And now all of a sudden, if we want to grow, even if we want to maintain, instead of writing 100 customers, we would need to write 150. But if we want to grow, that just put us in the hole a little bit further. So that's why the retention teams and all that is super important. So those are your 4 metrics right there.
Well, I have to say, obviously I've been working with insurance now for several years, and those are, cut to the chase. Those are the 4 buckets, right? You have to maintain and focus on. And again, you mentioned it before, under a captive model, and there's some very large captives. I mean, you see commercials every day, whether you're in good hands or whether, it could be anything, right? It could be any of those out there with a limited number of products. They can work 10 times harder and have, fewer customers to actually help because they just don't have access to all the products. And I've experienced it personally in multiple states, right? Talking to people and talking to relatives and friends. Hey, my premiums went up 30%, but I'm stuck here because, they have nothing they can do about it, until they shop it and realize, oh my gosh, I got a deduction. So I got a reduction somewhere else. And it was so much better. Well, why would you do that? As a consumer, let us do that for you, right? Let us be the person, your insurance agent for life under the We Insure model. Allows me to put it the right carrier, the right policy, the right coverage with your family, right? It's not just the best I have to offer. It's the best that's actually out on the market. And that's what you truly want from a service individual who's there, and especially someone that you trust to give you the right advice on insurance. If they have access to more products, you're going to get the true answer. So, Ron, I have to say this has been very informative. Thank you for sharing a little peek behind the curtain to see what we do with our agency owners. And again, we keep it simple. We keep it straightforward. You do the back end metrics. We put it all out there. And then we help you track those goals by being your accountability partner. So, we're going to make sure that you grow in 2021. So, Ron, thank you for joining me today. It's always great to have you on. I'm sure we'll have you on in the future for other topics. But again, fantastic day. And again, everybody, have a wonderful time. And thanks for joining again on We Wonder.